Welcome back to the Conscious Chefs podcast series. In this episode, we talk with Vojtech Vegh from Bratislava, Slovakia. Vojtech is an incredibly forward-thinking pioneer and the founder of Surplus, the world's first zero-waste vegan restaurant based in Siem Reap, Cambodia. Before he took the leap into business ownership, he spent 10 years traveling and working as a chef throughout Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. After his return to Slovakia, he revisited the idea of zero-waste cooking and brought back Surplus in the form of a consulting business, Surplus Food Studio. He now works as a food waste consultant and plant-based chef. In this episode, we chat extensively about sustainability and social responsibility, why veganism is trending and how to conceptualize vegan dishes as a meat eater, what it's like to own a restaurant without any trash cans, and practical, creative ways to think about and repurpose your food waste. We touch on what it's like to open a restaurant abroad, what it's like to close a dream, and how to bounce back afterwards. Vojtech also introduces us to the Black Truffle mindset, and we take a deep dive into kitchen mindfulness, mental mise en place, the importance of defining success on your terms, and dealing with judgment and criticism when following your own path. Vojtech has such a unique perspective on both food and life, and we hope you enjoy listening to this chat as much as we enjoyed having it. I'm your host, Heather Fair, and this is the Black Truffle Mindset with Vojtech Vegh, recorded on August 3rd, 2020. So, Vojtech, please tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get your start in the restaurant world?
Yeah, I really started like a kind of a traditional way where I finished my school at like 18. I actually left Slovakia when I was like 18 years old. So I spent most of my time traveling around like really Europe, Asia, Middle East, like Mediterranean countries. I lived most of my time in England. So that's where I got most of my experience. Like I squeezed in some internships in between too. And yeah, I just went all this traveled a lot between worked my way up basically. And it was just the same pattern everywhere to me where I see so much waste that I see everyone is being oh, it's like steaks and meat. It's always stealing all the show on the plate, I'd say. And I just naturally wasn't turning towards vegetables. Also growing up in a village in Slovakia, we had a garden, animals at the back. So we always had to make the use of everything we had at the hand. And it was always seemed natural to me to use all the parts of vegetables and use basically what we have on hand. And yeah, afterwards it just gave me an idea. Why not to open my own restaurant? What would that be like? I could just do whatever I want the way I want, and I made it exactly what I wanted. And it just happened to be in Cambodia, after so much traveling in Asia and Malaysia and Cambodia and all the Southeast Asia, I thought that Cambodia is fitted all the requirements, and especially the town I was in, Siem Reap. It was beautiful community of really cool people and entrepreneurs who's doing there is so much knowledge about waste and also vegan community. So it really did fit into that place. But
amazing. So your restaurant, so you're from Slovakia, you worked in Europe a lot, and then you opened a restaurant abroad in Cambodia.
Exactly.
So
yes.
That's awesome. That's not something that most people do. That's incredibly ambitious. And what was it like doing that? Because I've also opened a restaurant. I opened one in Bangladesh last year, and it was totally different in Bangladesh.
Okay.
Yeah, it was completely crazy, culture shock, crazy, nothing like it in the country. And so I understand a little bit about what that process is like to open a restaurant in a part of the world that's still developing when you're coming from another part of the world. So what was the experience like for you? What kind of challenges did you run into with language or culture?
Everything. Even though I was already familiar with Southeast Asia and the way of life and the way of working there, but there was no way I could be prepared for what was ahead of me, during the opening of the restaurant, to finding a place, getting all the legal stuff done, getting staff and figuring out everything. The whole process took me around 2 years approximately. I was traveling lots of time back and forth in Europe and back in Cambodia, back in England, back in Cambodia, because I was figuring out everything, how to find every supplier I need. Like everything had to be zero waste, locally made, locally served, sustainable, ethical, and like I had like so many requirements that was really hard to find in Cambodia. So while originally I didn't even want to open a vegan restaurant, it's supposed to be zero waste, but then there was like no organic meat available nowhere near in Cambodia, and I didn't want it to use like anything cheap or imported, so I just went like all vegan, like whatever, yeah, we just gotta be vegan.
Amazing.
But it took like so much hassle, and it like almost didn't happen. And then like, but thank God there was like so cool people that like helped me to like set everything up and like to push me to that. And yeah, and then we opened, and it was great.
That's amazing. So during the whole opening process, what was the most unexpected challenge that you faced?
How slow everything went. Like there was no way you can count. If someone says it's gonna be done tomorrow, it's probably like next week. And I had very limited time to. I actually bought like I didn't buy it. I rented it, but we renovated it all from the scratch, like from the ground, from the floor to the roof to the walls. It was
Oh
like
my
a small
gosh.
shack, and we ripped it all apart. And yeah, we did it in 5 weeks. And I had to, because I had got my tickets back home. I went back to work in England in the meantime before opening. So there was
Wow.
like a really small time frame that it had to be done. There was like so much stress, like so much stress. If I send you a picture of what it looked like 5 days before leaving, there were no walls and windows and floor. It was 5 days before us leaving from there.
That's
And
hilarious. That
we
also
somehow
like
managed.
that's exactly what happened with me too. We got there and it was very poorly timed because it was also a Muslim country and we started opening this during Ramadan, which is the worst
Okay.
idea possible because everybody's just on holiday. Nobody's around. And so and also nobody's eating during the day and also it's like so everybody's fasting. It's incredibly hot because it's the middle of summer and there's nobody
Mm.
willing to work at that point. So we're like, okay, so we had to tear down the entire place and we had 35 days on my visa to get the whole place set up. And it was complete chaos. On like week 3, it's still we're like walls of this like it was a blood testing center before it turned
Yeah.
into a restaurant. There's
Okay.
walls were still up. There's still like medical equipment in there, and I was like, this is never gonna happen. And then like it just all came together in the last like week. Everything came
Yeah.
in, everything started up, and then like 6 days later, we're like serving a soft opening, and we're like, how did that happen? Like that was a small miracle.
Yeah, actually, I was also like, it was like midnight before my flight at 6 o'clock morning. I was still cleaning in the kitchen in the restaurant. I literally went back to my hotel room, got changed, and went to the airport,
That's
and that was
exactly
it.
what I did too.
Because there was like no minute to spare.
Exactly. No, my flight was at like 4 o'clock in the morning, I think. And I think at
Yeah.
1 o'clock in the morning, I was cleaning, I was closing down the kitchen and like taking the plates back into the dishwasher and like getting everything set up. I showed up to the airport sweaty and smelly, and I was like, oh, okay, we did it.
Yeah, yeah. There was no sleep. I didn't even miss it. I was just like going all day long, all night long.
That's awesome.
And I had
So,
to return to England, because I ran out of money in the meantime because it took so long and there were so many unexpected things around it. So I went back to
right.
England, work, and then I came back and then I opened the restaurant.
Oh my gosh. So you were still working at a restaurant in England at the time?
Yes.
That's super crazy. And so the restaurant gave you the time off and was like understanding of what you were
It was a
doing.
seasonal work, so it wasn't a big deal.
Oh,
Yeah,
perfect.
so
That's
I literally
amazing.
went there for the season, and then after the season I went back to Cambodia, and there was something like 3 weeks, but it was like just an empty building without nothing. So I had to like set up all the kitchen, get the staff, like actually start creating the menu, probably, like what we're gonna serve. I had no idea about anything. I had like half of the suppliers at the time, and like nothing was close to ready. So
What was was going through your head at that point? Were you having any sort of like self-doubt? Were you like, this is never going to happen? Or did you have that level of faith in yourself that it was going to work?
I did not let these thoughts to my mind that it's not going to happen. I set the opening date on 1st of November, and I said, this is going to happen no matter what. I have actually called my cousin who's like working on a construction site in England. He came to Cambodia to help me with it. Like he was like painting and like helping with cleaning and building. And I remember very clearly those days I was working 20 to 22 hours a day. I literally went home just to catch a small 1 hour nap and went back to the restaurant. Mm-hmm. I was like pushing as much as possible. The first time I started developing the first dishes were like a week before opening. I had no idea what we're gonna serve. It was a week before opening I started like working on the food, because until that point it was just a construction site with no electricity, no water running, and like no doors and whatever.
Amazing. That's so funny. So was one of the hardest parts like sourcing food and like making that pivot to like, okay, I'm going to open a restaurant to I'm going to open a vegan restaurant? Like, were you vegan beforehand, or did you just enjoy eating like that?
I wasn't vegan, and I'm not vegan at the moment too. I'm like, very rarely, like it must be occasion or some special occasion for me to eat meat or some dairy products or something. But I'm lactose intolerant, so I don't eat much dairy anyway. And I can't have a honey, so it's like I'm allergic to it. So it's not a big deal really,
You can't have
I can't have honey.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
So it's like limits me down to like little meat or something. And I was always kind of picky about what I eat too. So I just cut it out naturally and like have it really occasionally. But back in Cambodia, with the restaurant, I really wanted to have like local, organic, which basically limited me to one single farm in the town. So whatever they had, I had to make it work on the menu. Well, there wasn't really anything else. I could pick a few stuff off on the local market, but that was really limited what I wanted, and I wasn't sure about the quality and where it comes from. So it was really tough.
But that's actually a really great example of making the best out of what you have available. That's something that I think a lot of people get stuck in, where they're like, oh, I can't do this because what I want won't work. And it seems like you saw this as like, okay, well, what I want is this, but what I have is this. So how do I make this work for this? Instead of just saying like, oh, it's not possible. It's like, how do I make this work with what I have available? And that's like a super important mindset that I think is one of the indicators of success in a person.
There were so many unexpected things that I didn't even dream about before. Like I thought, like I had these fantasies that like, yeah, I'm just gonna find some person or some passionate farmer that's gonna like grow me stuff. And little did I know that like, the red soil in Cambodia, you can't grow root vegetables. You can grow so many things. You can grow fruits.
Oh, whoa, really?
And because of all the, like there is like so many pesticides leaching out from the rice fields, which is like poisoning the surrounding fields. So you can't go producing in there. So which is basically limited me down to one aquaponic farm where they had like 20 different leafy vegetables and a handful of other stuff. And I was like, okay, so like, was there gonna be like salads? Like I was really struggling, and I was aiming for like a 10-course tasting menu. Well, I managed somehow. I did it at the end, but
that's awesome. So you did manage to do like a tasting menu style.
I wanted to go into I wanted to showcase like to not think about vegetables and vegan food as like the typical what came to your mind, like something of less. I wanted to showcase it in like a fine dining sort of style. Like really like taking care about it, and the tasting menu allowed me to like plan well for I basically knew what everyone gonna have when they come in. It was tasting menu only at the beginning. So and then I also did like lunches, like more like simple stuff like sandwiches and like, but everything must be local, everything must be probably there was like so many criteria that I mean if I would know what I'm going into, I wouldn't have that many criteria.
But no, that's awesome though, because that's also a really good example of what sticking to your values looks like, and knowing your values and having that understanding of this is why I'm doing it. Not just like, oh, I'm making good food, but knowing why you're making the kind of food that you're making is super important. And I think is something that's lost on a lot of chefs these days. Is like
It is
just
because
doing what's popular, what's cool, what's in,
mm,
what's trending to get the social media likes, but then forgetting about the actual human aspect of like, why do I cook this food? Like, what is my connection to it? And that's awesome.
I had that concept before I had the restaurant. Like even though I wasn't sure whether it's gonna be a restaurant, it's gonna be something else, but I knew exactly whatever I gonna do, it must be zero waste no matter what, and it must be at least vegetable focused, if not completely vegan. Which I managed to make it vegan, organic, local, focused, sustainable, ethical, and all the other good stuff. It was like it's still like like I don't know how I did it. If you ask me now, I don't know. I was just like going for it.
That's amazing. That's super impressive. What is so? I think a lot of people are interested in zero waste, but they don't even know how to conceptualize doing something like that because they think, oh, it's going to take way too much effort to save every little thing. And so how did you approach the zero waste method with your restaurant? Like, what did you do with your scraps? Like, what are some of the creative ways that you used up ingredients that most people would throw away?
I start with saying that zero, like food waste or any kind of waste, is a design problem or a system issue. I'd say if you have like too much waste ending up every night in a bin, then you obviously have a design flaw. You didn't do it well. I approach it with the approach as I do like every workday in a kitchen. You get your mise en place done, and you have an easy life during the service. It's like 80% of your work is doing the mise en place, basically. So I'm not saying that zero waste is like super easy. Well, it can be if you know what you're doing, but you really need to plan well. This is the most important thing, to think about it before you're actually gonna do something. To plan the whole menu to it, to plan the whole workflow, to adjust the kitchen to it. Well, most importantly, I didn't put any bin in the restaurant. So there were like no bins, so there obviously there couldn't be any waste because there was nowhere to put it. So I
That's
mean,
awesome. So you had
it
no
had to
trash
be.
bins whatsoever.
No. I just didn't do
Wow,
it.
that's awesome. I mean,
There
that's
were no
super smart
questions.
because you just didn't even give yourself the option to produce trash. But
No,
so even, okay, so you didn't have, okay, so because you had everything coming straight from a farm, you didn't have like boxes or bags or anything from the store. So
it
that
was
makes
wrapped in
sense.
lotus leaves.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
I had a small composting bin on my
Okay.
on in the garden that was used like for all the like the parts of the vegetables that are not edible. Like I don't know, pineapple skin is sort of hard to repurpose, and also pineapple leaves are not really good for your stomach. So like all these kind of things went into the composting. But other than that, there was nothing in the kitchen really to collect the waste. So there was no question from the staff like, what should we do with it? Because like just think first, like do something with it,
So
and
did you
it just
allow your
happened.
staff that creativity to come up with different ideas of how you could repurpose like vegetable peelings or scraps of stuff? Like, did you allow them that creative freedom?
If they wanted to, then yes, but there wasn't really a space for that because we opened for such a short amount of time that we were just like repeating the same thing that we've been doing, like sticking still to the same process.
Yeah.
And since it was like planned in a way that I really like challenged myself multiple times to think through the whole menu, whether there is any byproduct, any ways that I have forgot about that's gonna be created during the process. So I cut out every possible thing that could be. It really comes down to planning well in advance. If you want to do zero waste stuff, then before you start creating a dish, like think about it, like what's going in a bin. Look in a bin. Like bin is the biggest inspiration for me. Like this is where like most of the ideas come from. You look in a bin. Why is it in there? Do I really have to put it there? Is there any other use for it? Like do something with it. If you don't know, I don't know. Google something. Or there are so many things. It's
So
really like a mindset issue, and if you look at it as a waste, like if you label it that this is a waste, then it's gonna be waste forever. It's never gonna be something else. But
that's a
like
really
every
good
part of the
point.
vegetable can like treat it as you would treat the black truffle, I'd say.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting thing that you just touched on is if you call it waste, it will be waste. And I think that actually is applicable to a lot of things in your life, Like if you fixate on something and call it a problem, it's going to be a problem. If you call it like
Exactly.
this is what is happening right now, how do I deal with this, then you're going to get past it a lot faster and a lot easier than if you fixate on, this is a problem, this is something that's holding me back. So I think that's also a really awesome mindset to have, is like, your words matter and how you describe things matter.
Exactly. I would label it as a black truffle mindset. Like, you don't trim the black truffles, right? If you have like little bits left in a container, you use it for a puree, you do something with it. You see, you are already doing a zero waste. You're already doing this with a one product. Like, do it with everything else too.
Yeah.
Just because it's like a little bit cheaper, then it doesn't mean that you can waste it, because if you use like 10 kilo every day of it, it's not cheap anymore. Yeah. And like, anyway, what is cheap and what is expensive? You know, like, if you have a local organic produce, like, is it already too expensive to waste, or is it okay to waste? Or like, what is the threshold?
That's like, actually really great. I love that black truffle mindset, because I think that's going to resonate with a lot of cooks, because we know like every single part of a truffle is gold because it costs so much money. But I think it's interesting what you touched on, because it's not just money that we should be valuing. It's also the time and the energy and the effort that went into growing the vegetables and the produce. And, you know, if you're using an animal product, like, it's the energy that went into actually raising that animal. So why not use every single part of it for as much as you possibly can?
Because there is a big disconnection between chefs and the produce. Like, when you type in your order online, when you pick up the phone and order your stuff, you have no idea where does it come from. What is it? What was the life of the animal like? You've never seen it. You've never seen the vegetable. You never met the farmer. You never seen how much work and how much time went into growing that stuff. So you, like, somehow naturally don't appreciate it, because there is like this middleman between you, separating, you know, so you don't connect with it. I guarantee that if like every chef would have their own garden behind the restaurants, they would treat it really differently. Because if they would see, like, imagine having one shift in a kitchen, one shift in a farm, one shift in a kitchen, one shift in a farm, then
I completely
you probably
love that.
You know, you probably wouldn't waste as much. But since you don't see it, it comes in a, I don't know, it comes in a crate, it comes in a box, it's just like, whatever, it's just a product, you know, like, yeah, I wasted, it's, I don't know, carrots, it's only $2-3 a kilo, whatever, yeah, waste it. And you waste 5 kilo every day, 7 times a week, 30 times a month. And like, and then at the end of the year, you wasted $1,000 worth of carrots. Speaking only about one piece of vegetable, you know. And like, imagine I tell you that you can save like 50 grand a month.
Yeah. It's so crazy. And like, I got into zero waste mainly because I was working in the United States as a cook, and we get paid like next to nothing out here. And so it was more something that I got into at home first, where I was like trying to repurpose my leftovers, or sometimes I would bring stuff home when I was doing catering for other people. And I was like, okay, how do I make this into something else? Because I can't afford to throw this out right now. And when I first started catering, it was seasonal. It's very seasonal. And so it would be like, I'd work 100 hours a week for 3 months, and then I'd have 6 weeks with almost no work whatsoever. And then it would be a couple of crazy months, and then a couple weeks, no work. And so I really had to plan, and it became more of like a survival exercise for me at the time, where I was planning for those dry periods in my life. And I was planning for, 6 weeks of no work during the middle of the winter. So when I had that abundance of money, of food, of produce, I would prep it all and make stews or make sauces, or find ways to make like a veggie broth or a meat stock or something, and freeze that so that I could have that store for the winter. And then I realized like how easy it actually was when you just, like you were saying, you think ahead and you plan ahead. And I started transferring that into what I was doing with work. And then I opened my own business. And that's something that I'm incredibly passionate about right now, is using everything and not taking the ingredients that you have access to for granted.
It's just natural.
Yeah, I completely agree. And one thing I actually noticed that was really crazy, you said something earlier about the disconnect that people have between what they order and where it comes from. Yeah. So I taught butchery classes for a few years, where I would teach people how to break down a chicken. And a lot of people, they're like, oh, that's where the leg is on a chicken? And I'm like, you're consuming this animal, and you literally have no idea where on the animal you're eating this. And people don't know where a tenderloin is on a cow, you know? They're like, oh, I think it's in the arm or something. It's like, people have no idea. And I think that's, if you're going to be consuming a life, you know, you should at least have enough respect for it to understand what it is that you're eating.
When you walk into supermarket, there is like a bunch of meat products packaged in a plastic, put out in a shelf, or like lit up, nicely labeled. You don't look at it as a living animal, which it was. You know, you don't see a cow behind like every steak that's on a shelf in a fridge. You just see it as a product. You buy it, you go home, you do whatever, you trim it, maybe you forget about it, you leave it in the fridge, and then you get spoiled, and yeah, whatever, shit, then I put it in a bin. Yeah, but you don't see it like, you know, like how much went into it. It's actually part of an animal, and why it should be treated that way. Like, I think there is like such a big like knowledge gap and like the disconnection between like people and food in general, not only chefs and produce, but people and food in general. Like, especially more and more young people, young kids have no idea. Like, as you're saying, like the chicken have legs.
Like, where's the finger on a chicken? That's so funny. So again, just because I want to get people's wheels turning about ideas of like how they could implement zero waste in their own restaurants or their own lives right now. So like, what are some ways that you used up scraps? Was it like broths or purees, or like, what are some of the ingredients that you turned into something else?
You will never go wrong with like making a vegetable bread with like all the scraps. It's always right. It's the easiest thing to do. If you don't have time and space for anything else, you can always do a bread. You can reduce the bread further down and have a veggie demi-glace. Make sure you have a very balanced bread with like all the correct vegetables and root vegetables. This is the easiest thing. If you have a space, like collect all your scraps in a freezer, in a fridge, and somewhere. Tell all your chefs about it. Make it a rule. Take it step by step. Don't like jump on it up to. But it's always easier to do it like step by step and like see what works for you and what doesn't. I'd say it's like be less spontaneous in a restaurant, be more spontaneous at home, because you have like one piece of vegetables and two pieces or something like that. But like in a restaurant, like if you want to make a change, like think about it, imagine it in your head, like I don't know, like, you know, like just plan for it.
Yeah.
Not go beyond the vegetable breads. Like, use a dehydrator is a very handful tool. Make purees with like all the stuff, but like I always call it like flavor focus. Like, if the zero waste cooking is not tasty, then there is no point cooking in it. You know, like it must taste good. It don't treat your pot as a stock bin. Like, you know, like throwing everything in and then like, yeah, see what it's gonna be like. It's never gonna work, you know, like it must be tasty. And it's also about the communication to the customers, like to understand that why you're doing what you're doing. And it's really, you're not doing it because you're a cheapskate and you know, you want to save money on the customers, but you do it because you value your produce and you want to use everything. So,
and then saving money is just a bonus on top of that.
Saving money is like a byproduct of your efforts. Yeah. You know, like you are treating the vegetables with the respect to what it is. And like, you're also saving money, yeah, of course, but it's something that you can give back to the customer at some point. Everyone will like earn something from it.
And it's also interesting because with vegetables, especially, like normally the peel, the root, like those are the parts that have the most nutrients in them. And so they're actually better for you, but that's what we take off, and we only eat the center parts that are nicely colored and perfectly shaped, and then all of the scraps are just, you know, wasted and thrown away. But that's all the actual nutritional value of the food that you're eating. It's
also the nutrition, and it's also the flavor, you know, like I think every chef is focused on the flavor of his food. Like, you want to cook tasty food, so but remember that like most of the flavor is in the skin and it's in the leaves. The carrot tops taste more carroty than the carrot itself.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, like, save them, keep them, use them, I don't know, make a bread from them and cook your carrots inside, but cook your carrots with the carrot tops on them to extract the flavor. Like, zero waste, don't look at zero waste cooking as like trying to save money. Look at like trying to extract the flavor from everything that's in there. When you look in a bin, like, ask how much flavor is in there. Like, what would it taste like if we use it? You don't need to actually peel the vegetables for like everything. And it's not as much about peeling, you know, like zero waste is also about like having the correct storage, having the correct fish temperatures, having like airtight containers, not putting like too many components on the dish if you have no space in the fridge, for example. And like thinking through the serving process and the service time, that the chefs will actually have like good time preparing it, and you have a storage for it. It's like, it's kind of a complex, it's very complex if you take it that way, but it's really, I think the best approach is like going for it step by step. So whenever you are holding any like literally any vegetables in your hand, like just like ask yourself, like, can you use that skin? Can you use the root? Like, does it have to go to the bin? But if you are really brave, just like take your bin out of the kitchen, don't have it there. Like, no food allowed in the bin.
That's
And
awesome.
collect all your food waste and look at it at the end of the day and ask what you can do with it. How much flavor is in there? How much value is in there? What you can do with it tomorrow? Maybe you come up with one idea, better than nothing.
Did you separate your food waste by like this is our onion scraps, these are our like mild vegetable scraps, these are our herb scraps, just to make it easier to like find and conceptualize dishes, or did you kind of put everything in one bin?
If you really like made a decision that you want to go for like zero waste cooking and like going that way, then you should do like something that's called like a food waste audit kind of thing, where you do like a 3 separate containers set up in the kitchen, which is one is for the like a pre-consumer waste, which is during the preparation when you're processing all the foods in the kitchen. That's one bin. The second bin is all the spoilage, and the third bin is all the plate waste, which came back from the customer. It's technically not your waste that the customer didn't eat, but it's good to look at whether you have the portioning right, whether you really need all the components on the dish. And at the end of the day, look at it, measure it, how heavy it is. Do it for a week. Do it every day for 1 week. And I don't know, put a sheet of paper, type, I don't know, this person put that many waste in it, write it down, put down all the amounts, count it at the end of the day, and you're gonna know, do you have a kilo, do you have 10 kilos, maybe you have 20. And then go through the bin. I mean, yeah, put some gloves on and like look at it, what's inside. Is it really only scraps, or is it like someone throwing away trimmings because someone did like a square carrots or something? Like everything's going in there, you know, like these are the questions to ask. Unless you do that, you don't know what you're doing. Because like everyone's heavily underestimating how much food they're wasting. Like there is so many people telling me, yeah, but okay, we don't waste so much food. Like we are already doing it for a year. And then you do a food waste audit, and then they do like a 20 kilo food waste a day. Like, and they are surprised, like, how did it end up there? Like, didn't even know, you know, like, little scrap here, a little bit left over there, a bit of soup here, you know, like this. It all comes together. If you serve like 50 or 100 guests a day, like, trust me, it makes up quite a bit of waste.
That's actually a really interesting idea, doing a food waste audit. Is that something that you do with yes. clients now? So that's
the first step.
Transition that you've made?
Yeah, you need to measure. Before you want to manage something, you need to measure it. Otherwise, you don't know like what exactly is the problem. So you measure your food waste, you identify the problems, and you see, you actually have, you take a look at the root of the problem, like where the waste is created the most, and you approach it from that point, like eliminate it. The best food waste solution is food waste prevention. When you don't have food waste, you don't have to deal with it.
Yeah, and then also like you don't have to deal with trash and any sort of like waste pickup, and then you're saving money on that as well.
You're saving money again.
Again, it's like layers of saving money, and then there's like, you know, you just don't create that carbon footprint, and you make the world a little bit better. Yeah.
It's, you know, like, yeah, you invest some time in it, it takes some effort, you do something, but you do it once. It's about habits, you know, you create the habit of doing that, and then it's going to be that much easier after them. And you do it once, you create a system, you get used to it, you train everyone, you stick to it. Most important, you stick to it, and you take into action constantly every day, the same thing. And then there you are, easy.
So the action becomes a habit, and then the habit becomes a lifestyle.
Your values create the habit. I tell you that you need to have your values right, because if you don't believe in what you're doing, then you're not gonna go anywhere.
That's
if you think
so
that
true.
like
so true.
You know, you must believe in what you're doing. You must be convinced about it. You want to you're actually believing in reducing the food waste. You know why you're doing it. You have your values right. By your values, you create habits, and the habits create the changes. You always start where you're at and with what you have. make everything right, ask the right questions, also yourself, also your colleagues and everyone else. And you, step by step, you're gonna get to the changes. It's the progress.
Would you say that you're a naturally curious person? Like you like
Yes.
to see what you can do with things and you like to problem solve?
I like to question everything.
Yeah, I see that. I see that reflection in you because I'm also a very curious person and never satisfied with the first answer that I get. And I can tell from the way that you're speaking that that's something that you are like
I
as
just
well.
don't believe that we should do the things the way we are doing it now just because we are doing it. Like, I don't know, like, like all the habits we have at the moment, like all the way, and especially talking about like the restaurant culture and the kitchen and the food, like just because we are cooking it right now, like who came up with it first? Actually, like where does this idea come from? Like someone tells you like, oh, it's a culture, or it's I don't know, it's whatever. It's always been always. Like there is no always. It's like there was a person in the history at one point who started doing it that way, and I'm questioning it. Like my favorite things, like I have so much respect for all the French cooking, and it's like like how much they did for the culinary and how much they did for the food. But is it really the only way making an ice cream with egg yolks and cream? Heck no. If they would have a powerful blender 200 years ago, I guarantee they would not play with cream and eggs. They would just throw in some cashews and sunflower seeds, make the butter, freeze it, and there you have a nice sorbet right there.
And so I think that's actually a really interesting point too, because one of my favorite parts of traveling is just seeing how people have utilized the products that grew native in their area. Like, because that's what happened in France. French cuisine came from the things that grew in France. And now France has become this Bible for how food and cuisine is, and these ingredients are not available everywhere, but if you don't use those ingredients, it's not real food, and it's like, or it's not fine dining enough. But it's like France was just doing the best they could with what they had available, and that's what everyone should be doing to make
really
the
good
best produce. Yeah.
It's in like in Slovakia, like everyone is like, our diet is pretty potato heavy, like potato in every dish, like so much potatoes. But looking at the history, when was the first potato in Slovakia? It was like around the year of 1850. It's like 170 years ago. That was the first potato in Slovakia.
Wow. Wow.
Okay,
So
there is
what
no
was
sign of potato before that.
pre-potato Slovakian cuisine like?
It was like lots of grains and seeds and lots of plants and herbs that grow naturally in this area. Like also corn and potatoes. It's all South American. Like before, actually, it's you go back as far as Columbus. If he wouldn't travel to Southeast Asia, you would probably, I don't know when you would see a first potato.
Yeah.
This is how we got all this stuff, And now we all call it a culture, a habit, like because this is the real, like they say it's a real Slovakian food if you have like potato. But I mean, yeah, what is it? I'm not saying it's bad, but I wouldn't also
it's
call it
three
like
generations. Like it's not culture.
Yeah.
It's 3 generations.
It's literally like my grandmother was the second generation who started cooking with potato.
That's so crazy. That's not something that most people will ever think about, but it's a super interesting point.
Italy, like the first tomato in Italy was like 17th century. Like pizza was invented in Napoli was like 17 something in that around years. But like this is a tradition. You can't imagine Italian food without pizza and tomato sauce. It's like natural to there, but it wasn't there.
Yeah.
Like looking at the history, like you always like think that like Mediterranean is like vegetable heavy dishes. It's like so vegetarian friendly. But if you look back really at the history, like a few thousand years back, it was really very meat heavy diets. But it's changed. I'm by no means I'm calling it bad or wrong, but I'm just saying that you can't also call wrong if you are veganize some sort of dish. Because if I make a vegan bolognese, it's no wronger than a regular bolognese.
Right, because it's not like it's not something sacred. It's weird, I think, how people get so attached to a specific recipe and they get very angry if you alter it in any way, and it's like it's literally just food,
You see that? You see that, like how people are, one way, they are so connected to the food, but on the other hand, they are so disconnected from the produce.
That's
Like, some people can get really sensitive about the
spot
food
on.
culture that they have, and they would like fight with you that like this is the real stuff, you can't do that. Like, oh my god, when I cook like traditional Slovak food, but I do it all vegan, like I use tofu or I just use vegetables, like people are like, oh my god, this is not even real, like what you're doing with it. Like, I mean, like, but it's just a new thing, you know. Like, also your stuff is kind of new thing, it's only 200 years old, it's not that old. Like,
Yeah.
I'm doing new thing. Well, someone has to start it. I mean, come on, like someone had to start it.
I think what you're touching on is the idea of like, is this comfortable for me, or is this like what is the attachment? Is it just like I'm comfortable with this food, I identify with this food, but I actually don't know where it comes from at all, but it's something that I've done, it's a habit that I've built up, and yeah, stepping out
You're
of that
comfortable
mindset.
with what you are grown up on. Basically, what your parents fed you, that's what you are most comfortable with. It's just like everyone. Everyone's
Yep.
like that. If you would be born in, I don't know, in Korea, then this is definitely the best food on the earth for you. You would have not think of American or European food. Maybe you would like it, but it would still wouldn't surpass your Korean food. It doesn't matter where you are from. It's more about like what you are growing up into.
Yeah, and I think one thing that I've been thinking a lot about with food and comfort food in general, especially since COVID-19 and the rise of comfort food, because everybody wants to feel that comfort again because the
Yeah.
world is kind of crazy right now. And one thing that's really stuck out is that what comfort food really is it's replicating the feeling of being safe as a child. And so it's like, what does safety feel like to you? I think you can tell a lot about a person by what their comfort food is. And it's like, you're longing for that feeling of like what you felt as a child in that moment.
That's
And
an interesting question.
yeah,
You're definitely the most comfortable with that. I'm not gonna go wrong with. Like, if I have to say comfort food, it's definitely food very similar to what my mother is cooking,
yeah.
which is again very potato heavy diet. But it's comfortable. I know it's gonna be tasty. If there is
it's
nothing else coming up to my mind, I'm just gonna go for the ingredients that I'm most familiar with.
I think it's often comfort food is a memory that people have of something made with love by someone who really cared about them. And so
Exactly.
the ingredients are completely unimportant. It's just, what do you associate as, like, what's your first food memory of someone cooking with love, and like with real intention and like nourishing you as a person.
Yeah, and in most cases, it's a parent. It's your parents' food basically.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think there is a child who hates his parents' cooking. Like,
Right, right.
it's the first thing that you started eating, right? So
It's so funny. When I grew up in a part of the Midwestern United States in Cleveland, Ohio, which is like not known for its food, but it's very Eastern European. So it was a lot of
okay,
sausage, potatoes, a
good.
lot of like yeah, and pierogi and like dumplings, kind of like
Yeah,
paprikash kind of food. And so that was my comfort food growing up. But it wasn't very good because our family was like post World War II in the United States. I don't know if it was like that in Slovakia at all,
mm,
but post World War II, there was this explosion of packaged, boxed, microwave freezer meals,
mm.
and it became a social status to have these TV dinners and these box meals and to not spend all day in the kitchen. And so the less time that you spent cooking as a housewife, the more social status you had, because that meant that you could afford to buy these prepackaged meals and dishes and spend more time with your family. And I think it really contributed to the decline of food connection in American culture in particular. But now it's like, it's interesting because we're seeing this reversal of that right now. And so when I was a kid, I grew up thinking like, oh, this is food and this is what food is. And all right, I guess it's fine. And then I moved to New Orleans when I was 18. And New Orleans is heavily French Creole influence. Like, it's a completely different food culture, and food had flavor there. Like, people cooked from scratch. It was part of the culture. It was something intentional and not an afterthought like it was where I grew up. And that's when I really fell in love with food, as like, oh, I always joke that dinner in Cleveland is what you do before you start your evening, and dinner in New Orleans was your evening. And so it was like a different way of looking at food. And I think when you have that experience where it opens your mind up to something new and something different, it can be very powerful and really change the way that you see food in general.
I mean, it just sounds so wrong to like eat like packaged food and something. Like, I don't think it belongs there. I honestly, the first time I saw like pre-made meals and frozen meals, it was in England when I was like 20, I think, when I first time went to England. There's nothing like that in Slovakia. Like, people would laugh at that, and you still don't see that in Slovakia. It's very, very limited, and no one's buying it. It's like sort of like degrading yourself. Like, what you're doing, like what you're eating. You're eating some like pre-made. I mean, can't you cook yourself? Like, you know, like, what is wrong with you? Like, I was like so surprised, like going into England and like seeing all these like frozen stuff, and I was like looking at it like, are you joking? Like, people actually buying it, are living on it. I was like, what are you doing? Like, there is no nutrition, there is no nothing in it. Like, why are you eating it? Like, you're poisoning yourself. It's just like so natural to like cook for myself. Like, even if I can't cook, I mean, just like do something super simple. Like, everyone can do something, I don't know, stir fry in a pan or whatever, you know, like, it's so easy.
That's so funny, because it's like, you were like, why would you buy prepackaged food? And I was like, oh my God, people can actually cook for themselves. So it was like we had the exact opposite at that point in our lives. That's cool.
Growing up with a garden, you know, like, I don't even, you know, like, I was well into my teenage years when we first went to the supermarket. Like, everything came from the garden. Like, my mom would go into the shop to buy produce. Like, I remember my mom joking with, like, look at the stupid people going to the town, going to shops buying produce. Like, you don't even know what is it coming from, what quality is it. Like, there is a garden full of stuff, you know. Like, it was just like so natural to me. Like, I see nothing else. It was like so unfamiliar with like buying produce, picking from the shelf. Like, is it even food? Or like, you know, like, I was so confused in the first years.
That's so interesting. So you grew up cooking, like, you learned how to cook from a very young age?
I wouldn't like say so that I was cooking. I did not intend to be chef at all, that's for sure. I had no idea what I want to do.
Same.
So it was like my mother cooking, you know, like at home, and I always seen a food made from scratch, and I always seen where the food comes from and all this process. So it was like the first thing I did. And then I went into England, and I seen the chain restaurants where it's like so many stuff comes in prepackaged. And I was like, you're not even cooking, you're heating. You know, like, I was really baffled, like, by the idea. Like, how can you, like, I didn't know what to say. I didn't feel like chef anymore.
So did you move to England to start cooking, or did you start cooking after you moved to England?
I started cooking before because I went to the chef college in Slovakia.
Okay.
So I have my training in there. I went for internships in Greece. And then from there, I was like very clear about it that I have no interest living in Slovakia, since like, I don't know, I never been interested living in Slovakia. It's like by pure coincidence that I'm living here at the moment. I'm still surprised by myself. And then I went to England, and from there on I was just like traveling back and forth between Asia, between other countries. I was always used to go back to England. It felt like home. It still feels like home. I haven't visited for like 2 years now, but it's like still like my second home country in England. So yeah.
That's cool. So then after you had the restaurant in Cambodia, after you closed down, like, what was that like? Because I know right now a lot of chefs and restaurateurs are in that process of losing their restaurant. And I think you probably, just from talking to you right now, you wouldn't describe it as losing your restaurant, but that's how a lot of people are seeing it. But what was it like to close a dream, and like what happened afterwards?
I was like, when I knew that I'm gonna close, well, first of all, I closed for like very like sort of personal family reasons that like made me to move back to Slovakia, and I was like clear about it. I have no interest anymore living in Cambodia and doing the restaurant. So I decided to close it as the best option that I can do. I was very clear about the fact that what I'm closing is the first physical location of surplus. that like it's not going away. I'm not killing it. I mean, the idea stays. I knew I'm gonna come back to it. I'm pretty sure I'm gonna like open something again at some point somewhere. And I knew I want to continue, but I also knew I need a break. Like if I want to survive, I need a break for sure. I was naturally looking for jobs. Like I closed the restaurant. I flew back to Slovakia. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was like going through so much shit at the same time that I was doing nothing. I went to my mom's house where I was like spending my days inside, being there by myself. I don't know, spending time in my head, thinking about everything, putting all together, like what just happened, what I'm gonna do. So naturally went into looking into jobs like what else can I do? Yeah, no, I mean I had to survive, so I went to the jobs. I went to job, I was unable to work. I was like so extremely burned down that I had to tell the head chef like 2 days later that I'm sorry, like I can't continue. Like I can't do my best, like nowhere near my best. I mean I just not gonna work. I'm sorry. Like, yeah. So this is like, like there was like so much. I was really unsure about what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to chill. I wanted to take a break. I wanted to like step away from it all to like take a look at the bigger picture, like what happened, like what I can take from there, and like what I can, what is it trying to teach me, like all this process. Closing a restaurant is like, it doesn't have to be the end of the world, even though it's like a massive financial loss. But like after all, it's just the money. Like money comes, money goes, right? So like you're gonna make it back at one point. So it's like not end of the world. Like yeah, and thinking about the current situation, I'm grateful about the fact that I had decided to close it. I would not want it to be in Cambodia in a lockdown with a closed restaurant right now.
Oh my gosh, I can't even imagine. Yeah, that would be another level of stress.
Everything happens for a reason.
Absolutely.
Always. Everything happens for a reason. There is something behind it. So like ask like, what is it trying to teach me? Why is it happening to me? Like, or why is it happening for me?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That was a huge vocabulary shift I made in my own life that changed so many things. Was like, is it happening to me or is it happening for me? Because you can look at every situation two ways. You can look at it as I am the victim and this is the worst thing that's ever happened to me, or this is actually something that is closing so that something else can manifest in its place. Or it's like it's a step on the journey. It's not the door shut. Because you can never go back. I think a lot of people get stuck in this mindset of like, oh, I'm starting from scratch again. It's like, no, you're not. You're starting from experience. Because you have so much that you've already done, and you are not the person that you were when you started this journey. Like you are already so much farther ahead than you give yourself credit for.
Like every loss and like every form of rejection is redirection. It's like you always gotta gain from it, like from every loss. I mean, I know it's so hard to see when you are there in that moment. Like you don't see nothing else. You are grieving. You don't want to lose it. But at the end, I'm thankful for like everything that happened to me because like it taught me so much and like pushed me to like completely new directions.
Mm-hmm. And exactly, there were so many things where in my past, like I thought, oh my gosh, this is horrible. I really wanted this. You put so much importance on getting something, and then you realize that you didn't get it for a reason. Like I ended up getting stuck out in the middle of the desert at the beginning of the year, and just having this opportunity fall into my lap of house sitting for a few months in January. And then the lockdown happened, and I'm in like the most perfect situation that I could possibly be. And it's like, if I wouldn't have taken the opportunity when it was presented to me, if I was constantly chasing something else, I would have missed this entire part of my life. And it's so crazy. It's like I think a lot of people, cooks especially, are so focused on what's wrong that they forget to look for what is actually right.
Yeah. Always be grateful and appreciate like what you have around you. Like it's sometimes it's really hard to look at it. Sometimes it's really hard to be appreciative and like everything seems to be go wrong. But I mean, I also had like such a hard time to like making or like finding something good in all that bad. But I mean, thinking back, like imagining my previous lifestyle of like constantly traveling and moving and not living anywhere, and like imagine the lockdown happened then, and like being stuck somewhere in Bangkok airport, for example. What would I do? I don't know. I mean, thank God that I decided to settle in Slovakia. So I mean, like I'm in a safe place. I have somewhere to live. I'm good.
Yeah. It's like things always work themselves out in the end. Like as crazy as life
Always.
can get, as chaotic as things can get, as hard as it can get, and as impossible as things might seem, it always works itself out. And it might not be immediately, it might be 5, 10 years from now that they work themselves out, but it will work itself out.
There is no other way.
Yeah.
It's the
there's
only way,
balance
right?
in the universe, you know, there is always
Yeah.
balance. If you could give your previous self, like your younger self, like a piece of advice, what would you tell yourself? Like, what would you do differently to someone who is in your position currently?
Think twice. Probably really think twice, and like be cautious about the red flags.
So, like, what kind of red flags are you talking about? Just to give people an idea.
When like something is going wrong, like if the same thing is going wrong multiple times in a row, it's probably not the way. Like it's harder to stop than to start. I never had a problem with like motivation and like starting something and with the energy in it, but I had a struggle stopping and like knowing when to stop when it's enough. And
Mm.
this was something that I learned in the past like 2 years. Like to know when to stop is actually more important than to know when to start.
It's so, so important to realize. Is like, it's actually like a life skill that is a predictor of success. And I've read a lot about this, and I actually wrote a little bit about this a couple months ago, is like knowing when to stop, when to change direction, when to rethink your approach is something that all successful people know how to do. And it's like, it's not failure, it's just redirection. Like you were saying earlier, rejection is just redirection. And it's like having, like, taking your pride and your sense of like your personal ego out of it and being like, okay, this isn't working, so how do I make this
Yeah,
different?
I'm not saying that it's not gonna be hard and that you shouldn't push hard and it's like gonna be easy process, but listen to your gut feeling. It's like the most important thing. Like if you feel inside that this is wrong and this is not the right and you shouldn't do that, then don't do it. Like no matter how much money and how much time you spend it, don't do it.
Yeah, I think one thing that's hard for a lot of people that I've realized is understanding what's a gut feeling and what's just anxiety in general.
Yeah,
And like
yeah, yeah, yeah,
learning
yeah.
how to identify your actual inner voice from the voice of fear, from the voice of other people, from the voice of your culture and society in general, and like learning what's you and what's everyone else.
Anxiety goes away, but gut feeling doesn't.
Right.
Right? So if you're anxious about something, you might be anxious for a day, for a few weeks, until you maybe sort that problem out. If it's sorted, then the anxiety got away, right? You're not anxious anymore. Then it's all good. Continue what you're doing. But if you sorted out the problem and you still don't feel right about it, there is still something boggling you that is just like shouldn't, or there's something like, it's about the thoughts that you have before you fall asleep. Like
Yes. Oh
this,
my God.
like
Yes.
this is what you have to like listen to actually. Like if it's there when your head is like completely empty and it's still hanging there, then that's the problem. That's the thing you have to focus on. Like taking the right direction. I have no regrets at all whatsoever in my life because I mean it's really important to I believe in like starting young and like doing the most at the young age. Like like you can screw something up and like you still have plenty of time to fixing it. But also like just like don't pursue, like make sure that the goals that you're trying to pursue are your goals and not someone else's. Not something that you see on Instagram or not something that your parents told you.
That's so, so important. And I think a lot of cooks fall into that trap of like, this is the path that you have to take if you want to be a
Mm,
successful chef, because that's what Chef's Table says makes a successful chef. You
mm.
know, it's like, well, what's success? What does success mean to you?
How do you measure it? Like how do you measure
Exactly.
success?
Exactly. Is
You
success
don't.
money to you? Is success having a life outside of work and having the free time to actually enjoy your life? Or
But
is success like following your passion?
if success is money, then you're never gonna be successful because you
Yeah.
always can have more money.
Yep.
There is no top. You don't reach the top. If you're a million, you want a billion. If you're a billion, you want 10. Like
And then you're
it's,
Jeff
it's
Bezos and you're still unhappy.
yeah, exactly. Like I definitely wouldn't define success by money. It's like
No.
you define your own success, whatever it means for you. You don't even need to have money as long as you're happy with your life and you are fulfilled by what you do and you feel like completely happy and satisfied. You are definitely successful. Like, just like define for yourself and like do what you want. There is no such a thing as have to. It's like so easy to fall into the trap of like trying to like please people and like like fit in and things like that. But this is actually the worst thing that you can do for yourself. Even though it's always hard at the beginning to like stand out, like do your thing, like no one's believing in you, like everyone's questioning you. But don't forget, like it's also what I do to the others, like question everything, So like I also like to question myself before someone else questions me.
Absolutely.
So I always like
that's super important.
So like don't double check, but like triple check what you are doing and that you are really doing it for yourself.
Yeah, it's like finding your own reasons for doing what you're doing was a huge thing for me. It's like, am I doing this for me, or am I doing this to prove something to other people, or am I doing this because society says that I should be doing this? And I got exactly. I got to a point in my life where I realized that a lot of the things that I was doing were things that society was telling me I should be doing. And it wasn't a path that I really wanted to be walking. It was just what I felt like I had to do, especially like as a woman in the culinary industry in the United States, is like, you feel like you have to kind of work harder than you actually do to gain the respect of people. And I'm grateful that I did what I did in my early 20s, especially, traveling and working with the high profile chefs that I did, because it gave me a little bit of security and an edge for, the next phase of my life when I decided that I didn't want to be doing that anymore. I had that like pedigree, and it makes you a little bit more like credible, and people are like, okay, they know what they're doing in the future. But it was still like, if I had to do it again, I probably wouldn't, I would definitely, some of the jobs that I took, I would have gotten out immediately. But I had this idea of like, oh, I have to work there for a full year for it to count. It's like, it doesn't matter. It's what you take away from the experience, not how much time you put into it.
It's same like I always wanted to go into like this really high profile, the sort of the best restaurants for internships. It's like hard to get in. And when I got in, like, it was amazing experience, of course. Okay, the first one was amazing. The second one was cool, like, loved it. But then I was just, like, going for more and more. And, like, when I was, like, in a third and fourth, I was like, why am I even here? Like, what am I learning? Like, I don't know, like, where is it taking me? Or, like, how does it count in my life? Like, can I do something better?
I'm picking microgreens for 6 straight hours. Like, what am I doing?
Yeah, like, like, do I actually need it? Like, because there's such a massive difference in the restaurants. Like, I mean, my biggest advice, if like anyone want to go for internship, like, pick wisely. Like, make sure you know where you're going. There are great restaurants where you learn a lot. Like, they can really like fast track you. But there are also restaurants where you just like, I don't know what you gotta do. Like, no one knows what you gotta do.
Yeah.
Like,
you're gonna peel carrots in a corner for 8 straight hours and not really learn anything.
And then you put it in your CV that you've been there for 3 months, and like the next HR person gonna be like, "Oh wow, you are amazing." And like, but do I care about it? Like, when you think about me, like, I don't know. Like, no.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it can help a lot if you struggle with confidence as a chef at all, to have that sort of resume security,
It's good.
Yeah. It can help build you up. It can help you believe in yourself in the long run. If you know that you can make it at one of those places, then you kind of have this idea of like, all right, well, I did that, so this should be no problem in my future.
I'm not saying that you shouldn't go there. You should, but make sure you go there for the right reasons.
Exactly.
Because if it's just you want this cool sentence or this cool name in your CV, then it's probably not the right reason.
Right.
That's not the way to go, because I wanted to like you collect it as a badges, like, oh, I've been here and there, and like, I don't know, that many stars and these accolades and whatever. And what I ended up doing, actually, I ended up not putting it in my CV, any of them, when I was applying for the work, because I figured out that everyone was like hiring me only because of that.
Yep.
And they thought about me like I'm sort of a Superman, know everything, like been everywhere, and like, I mean, nowhere near about that. I'm still just a chef. So then I decided, like, I'm not talking about it. I'm not telling anyone. I'm not putting it in my CVs anymore. I mean, it's an experience. It was great. I loved it. But, like,
it's not everything.
Nothing meant to stop.
Yes, exactly. That's a great way to tie it full circle there. And it's like,
Yeah.
for me, it's like it manifested in two ways. Like, one was they either were like, oh, you're gonna be in charge of everything right now because you have all this great experience, or I got the you're overqualified for what we're doing.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm applying for. I know how much this job pays. I know what I'm applying for. Like, if I thought I was overqualified for it, I wouldn't even want the job in the first place. And so it's
So many
like you
times.
get like that weird judgment from people. It's like, oh, we can't pay you enough. And I was like, I'm not asking for that. Like, I literally am just like
There's so
wanting
many
to
times.
learn from this particular place. Like, I want to still learn. And people think that when you have that experience, it puts you in like a different level. And it's like,
Yeah.
but I'm not. I'm just a cook.
And they're looking at you and asking me like, "Are you sure you want to work here? Like here?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I applied. Like why not?"
That's so funny. Yeah, I've definitely like taken a lot of places off of my resume when I'm applying to certain gigs now. And
Yeah,
just because
yeah,
it's like you don't want to give the wrong impression. You want to like it's weird. It's weird how it's like it becomes like everything at the beginning of your career, and then it like the importance just decreases the more
yeah.
you kind of
I
do
never,
your own
I never
thing.
intended to like use those big names like, oh, but like look at me because I've been there and here and there. Like I figured out like maybe I did that when I was like really young. I was like
Yeah.
dreaming about going into big places, but then I figured out it's like much better. I want to be known for who I am and what I'm doing, and not for
Yes.
where I was working before and who I was working with. So
Exactly.
it's more
Exactly.
important it's always again comes down to finding your own way and doing it for the right reasons.
It's so interesting because my experience in like Michelin star kitchens and those highly rated world's 50 best restaurants is my takeaways were all mindset. It wasn't really like cooking
Yeah,
skills or anything
yeah,
like that. It was how to
definitely.
think about food, how to be more intentional with the things that I do in my daily life.
And
And
the
it's more
discipline.
like organization. Yeah, it's like the mental discipline as well as the physical discipline. So I know people like they like to, shit talk those sorts of places of like, oh, it's just not real cooking. It's like it's not real cooking by the standards you are used to, but it's the mindset that I got out of that was the most valuable thing out of my entire career.
Definitely, like this makes such a massive difference. Like when someone's asked me like, okay, but what is the difference like in a 3-star kitchen and like this kitchen? I mean, like it's just yeah, of course the food too, but it's like more importantly the system, the organization, the how you organize your time, how you talk, how you treat your colleagues, like even how you pose yourself, like how you walk, how you do every
How
single
you
thing in there.
move. It's like,
How
do you
you
cut the tape or do you tear it? Like you think
never
about
tear the tape,
all
never
never
tear the
tear the
tape.
tape. That's like when I interview people, I always have them label something and I just watch how they label it. It's like, do they put the
And
date
you
on
judge
there?
them by
Do
that.
they cut the tape? Like how do they when they put it in the refrigerator, is the tape facing outward so that you can read it, or do they just shove it
Is
in
it in
there?
the
And it's like,
middle or is it in the
yeah,
side?
yeah. And it's
Yeah.
like, it sounds like such an arbitrary thing, but it really does tell you a lot about how someone thinks.
It's
And like,
important.
it's so important. And it drives
First thing
everyone I've
first.
ever lived with crazy because I also do that at home. But so any roommates, any partners, like they've just been like, you're insane. But it's like, no, I know what's in my refrigerator. I know how to do inventory.
It's the one most valuable thing. Knowing how to organize yourself, how to organize your time, how to do your mise en place every day, get it sharp, done on a time. This is
Mm-hmm.
like crucial thing in every kitchen. And I think that this is a rule that you can apply in every kitchen. It doesn't belong only in these high-end places, but it's something that you can do anywhere and everywhere. And
And
it's
you can
what
also
I'm
bring
also
it
doing
into
and
your
was trying to
life.
do. I'm doing it because I was like I was perfectionist before I knew that word perfectionist. Like I'm like sort of like okay, I have like this OCD kind of thing. Like everything must be in order. And I remember like first time walking into this like highly organized kitchen, I felt so soothing and like so relieved that it's just natural in this place. Like everyone does it the same way.
Yep.
I was so relieved.
Just to be
Like
on the
yeah,
same wavelength with everyone,
yeah,
and then you don't have that one guy that's put like the one thing in kitchens that just annoys me on another level is like the honey jar or a syrup jar. If there's just like a drip on the side of it and they put the cap back on, I'm like, are you kidding me?
I don't do that
right
at
now?
home.
Like, I don't either.
You don't do that. It's like what freaks me out when I see people working and like so much mess around the chopping board, or like putting balls on a chopping board, like not organized. You know, like, I'm used to like working in a very tight place with like lots of stagiaires, where you have like you have to work in a small like box in a small. You have like a one meter square. Yeah, you have like everything highly organized and like put everything in the fridge. You're like, oh man. I mean, and I of course I kept these like, and I did this at home. So I can't do it any other way.
I can't either. I am totally with you on that. Was that a challenge when you were training a staff in Cambodia?
Yeah. And it was also a challenge back here in Slovakia when I was like explaining some sort of things. They were looking at me like, what is wrong with you? Like why
does it matter? Like, you're
like,
kind of
what
crazy.
You're doing? Or when I walk in the morning and like the walk-in fridge is like a big mess. I was like, what you doing? I was like, you don't even know what you have in that fridge. Like, what the hell? Like, you need to do something with it. But this is like, it's really, I find it sometimes hard to like tell or like train other people to that, because it really comes down to having the mindset about it. And if you are naturally not like that, then it's gonna be a hard time teaching that. So
if you don't see, and also if you don't see the value in the end results, and I think it is a really hard thing to teach people. Not impossible, but definitely difficult. You have to find out what their motivations are and kind of play on their motivations to actually do things in a certain way.
But it's crucial in a professional kitchen. Like, if you're not organized, then you're gonna get smashed during the service time.
Yeah.
Like, it's not allowed. There is no such a thing as going down in a fine dining restaurant or something. You know, like, it just doesn't exist in there. Because you're so organized, you know everything. Where is it? How much is it? What is it? Who made it? How you do everything? And like everything is like properly made. So why just don't transfer these skills into like every single kitchen? And I'm like trying. I'm like this is what I'm talking to people. Like, before you start doing any changes, you first need to know what you are doing at the moment, like properly.
No, it's interesting because one thing that so this project started as a YouTube series called Mise en Place Your Life, and it
I like that name.
It grew into a blog and now a podcast, and there's like a Facebook group, and so it's growing and like evolving. But it started as like how do you get your mental mise en place on the same level as your physical kitchen mise en place? And one of my favorite analogies that I've used that you kind of almost said the same thing right now was like when you put your produce in your walk-in and it's a complete disaster, what happens during service? It's chaos. You know, you don't know where anything is, and you don't know like how, like you're lost. You're spinning around in circles. I think everybody's worked in that kitchen with a spinner, you know? I just like this one person that's just kind of always like, and you feel anxiety just looking at them. But you need to do that with your mind as well. It's like you can't just dump everything in a corner and expect that it's going to sort itself out. Like your carrots are not going to grow legs and put themselves on the shelf. Like, you have to pick your carrots up, and whether your carrots are like your self-worth issues, whether they're your fears, whether they're your culture, whether like whatever is holding you back in your life, those are your carrots in your walk-in. Like, you have to pick them up and actually figure out what they are. Like, look at them, take inventory of your head and your life, and actually organize it intentionally and label it and say, like, this is here and I know this is why it's here and I want this to be here. And like, if there's something rotting in the back corner of your mind, like, you have to throw it out, you know, you can't let it sit there. It's gonna, you know. So I think there's a lot of kitchen skills that can be transferred to mindset, and it's like trying to conceptualize those things. I think it's been kind of a fun little journey as well, and just understanding that like as cooks we already know how to do this, you know, so it's not such a lofty task to organize our minds. It's like something we know how to do in the physical world. We just need to transfer that mindset into our inner world as well.
There is so many transferable skills from hospitality, like in general, like like because it mostly comes down like there is like the pressure, that is you have the stress, you constantly work on the pressure, you constantly like okay, some places are chaotic and disorganized, but they're like still finding their ways and stuff in there. Some places are highly organized. Like there is so much. I think that like anyone who's working hospitality, like no matter what position, there is like so many applicable skills to like all the other industries as well. Also in your personal life, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the one thing that holds so many chefs back from actually pursuing their dream and following their passion is their own head, you know?
You need to think beyond, like what is a chef's job? Like, is he cooking on a line, or is it like what industry are you in? Are you in the hospital industry? Are you in the food industry? Like there's so many options and opportunities that you can do as a chef. Being a chef, it doesn't mean that you have to like slaving on a line every night, or like being on a fast, or like prepping at the back. There's so many things that you can do. You can look outside of the restaurant. There's like literally endless possibilities. Once I wandered out of the kitchen, it's only then I figured out that like, oh my god, but I can do that. Oh yeah, but they need help with that. There you go. A product development, a menu planning, a concept creation, consulting with that, and I don't know, so many things. Like, and I find out, yeah, but I already know how to do that. Yeah, I can do that. I already did that in that purpose. Yeah, I can do that too. So it's like it comes so easy, like, and you're still learning. Like, you're still learning new things that you can again apply like back when you go back into the kitchen. Yeah, it's like becomes so much easier. Like you never stop learning. Like this is the biggest thing. Like just for God's sake, like there is no such a thing as knowing everything. Like no one knows everything.
No, it's so funny. It's like the moment you think you do know everything, that's when you just gotta quit. It's when you gotta quit.
Yeah,
Because why are
that's
you
where you
doing
got
it?
it wrong. Yeah.
Yeah. But okay, so coming from a small town, in a small village, in
Yeah.
a smaller part of the world, did you face any sort of criticism or judgment from the people that you grew up with for the path that you've chosen to pursue in your life?
Oh hell yeah. I was I was a bad. I wasn't good at college at all. I had to repeat. I was repeating classes. I repeated the whole year. I was transferred to the classes. I like there's so many problems with me. Like they wanted to like kick me out of the school. I never attended school actually. I was really bad. Like I did not care about anything. I was always told I never gonna make it anywhere. Like I was constantly told, better by teachers, like people and be like, what you think you're doing? Like what are you doing? Like you like look at yourself. Like you don't even go to you can't even go to school. Like what you want to do in your life? Like yeah. But this is what actually motivated me. Like like oh yeah, this is what you think. Like yeah, I'm gonna prove you wrong. Like it was always like it was also more about like proving to myself that it's actually not true what they are saying. And of course, like yeah, little. I mean, go to England from like a small Eastern European country where you like barely speak any English, and then go and try to make it there.
Yeah.
Like yeah, that's gonna take some time and hard work and like like earn some authority and respect and like actually figuring out what you are doing. That was always, and I think this is like more of a thing when you're like really coming from like the tiny places and the small places where you like don't have so much knowledge about the general idea of the world, like how things work and what is it like, and then you feel like so lost. But I don't know actually. Like I don't know how to describe. I always was some sort of like naturally very ambitious and like was always going for it. I always knew. I don't know how. Like I always knew I don't want to live in Slovakia. I just gonna leave right when I can, and it's exactly what I did. Like I wasn't even. I was right 18 here when I left Slovakia. So and I just like I never came back.
It's exactly the same with me too. It's so funny. We have a lot of parallels with our story. And like 18, I was like, I always grew up and I was like, I don't really belong here. This is just where I am right now.
Yeah.
And it's like, I feel like most of my life has been a search for, like, I always knew that there were people like me out there, just not where I grew up, like not where I grew up at all. And my life has kind of become a quest to find the people, like to find my tribe essentially. And it's, the kitchen was the first step in that, of like really finding people who got it. And I think that's why a lot of people fall into that, where they're like, oh, it's a bunch of other people who are also not really fitting in well with their society or their family, and we kind of just band together as like this group of misfits.
I don't like when someone tells someone that you can't do it, or when someone tells me that you can't do it. Like, how could you do that? Or like,
Watch
like,
me.
yeah, it's not for you. Then I'll be like, yeah, just yeah, there we go. It's almost like literally when someone tells me that I can't do it, and then a year later I got it. Like, I just for the fun of it, like
Yeah, it's
an
like
idea of
using
opening a
that
restaurant is
negativity to fuel your motivation and not letting it sink in. Because I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with is like someone will tell them like, oh, you can't do that, and then they'll believe them. Like
no,
they'll
fuck
just
that.
believe them because they've been beaten down by life so many times and they've just heard no so many times, and they don't realize that like the only person whose no actually matters is your own.
Exactly. The only opinion you should listen to is your own.
Yep.
Like all the best thing in the world that are existing at the moment came out from like the craziest people who been told that they're not gonna make it anyway.
Yeah.
So like, don't let anyone to tell you off that there is no such a thing as you can't. If you believe that you can't do it, then you can't. But if you
You
believe that you
won't.
can, then
Yep.
you can do it.
Yep. I totally believe in that as well. And my life has proved that to me time and time and time again.
Yeah.
And that's, I think,
It all starts here. It all starts in the mindset.
yeah, absolutely. So I don't want to keep you too long. We've been speaking for a little bit now, but I want to wrap up with what if you could change one major part of the restaurant industry, and like if you could, because I know we're in kind of this weird time of transition right now with restaurants in general, where everything's like kind of closed or in a holding pattern or transitioning into doing takeaway only. But if you could re-envision one part of the restaurant industry's future, what would that look like to you?
Reduce the meat. Go plant-based. Like things never gonna go back to normal. Like, don't sit and wait until it go back to normal, because it just doesn't. Like, this is not a disruption that like, yeah, okay, now we have a coronavirus and then it's gonna go away and then we go back to where we stopped. No, it's not. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
Like, after that, there's a change gonna come, and you already see the plant-based shift. And I'm not talking about vegans. I'm talking about people who prefer to eat plants instead of meat, who are swapping their everyday meat diet for like twice a day a plant diet. Just that's important. Like, don't stick to what you've been doing before the pandemic. Offer, make a like, try to attract new guests. Do something new. You it's literally the time when you can do anything right now. You can't even go wrong. Like, no one knows what they are doing. Just do something.
No one ever knows what they're doing. Like,
exactly.
we're all just
and
kind
now
of
even
making
more.
it up as we go along.
And now even more. Just like, you now have like the perfect time for change when you can. It's like, it's not gonna be that massive change, because you're gonna cut out the meat. You're gonna do more plant-based dishes, whatever way you like it, and you're just gonna go with it. Just do it.
I think one thing that's awesome, yeah. And one thing that I think scares a lot of people is the unfamiliarity of vegan cuisine in general. Like, people make it out to be like this big scary, like, oh, it's so different, But how to actually think about vegan food, because I know a lot of times when you get a vegan dish at a restaurant that's cooked by a meat eater, a predominantly meat eater, it sucks. Like, it really sucks. And so it's not nutritionally balanced. There's no interesting flavor or textural components to it. Like, there's no protein in the dish. It's not like a complete meal. So like, learning about nutrition and like, how would you give advice to someone to start to conceptualize vegan cooking if they have no experience with it whatsoever?
Don't look at it as something less. Like, if you're gonna treat your vegetables the same treat you treat your Wagyu beef or your bluefin tuna or the sea urchins or the lobsters, then you gotta do something better with it than boil the carrots and put them on a plate. Like, treat all the vegetables and all the produce in the same way, no matter what their cost is, and that's when you're gonna have a good dish. You can literally Google the basic nutrition, the nutrition information. This is the least. It takes a minute. You can get this information right. Like, approach the vegan food with the same way like you approach every other dish. It have to be up to the standard of your other dishes on the menu. And also, it's the crucial thing, which been proved by multiple studies, the language that you use. Like, stop calling it vegan food, because vegan
turns so many people off.
Yeah, it literally screams that different from me. It literally says different from me. Call it plant, or don't even mention it at all. Call it with something familiar. Call it local. Use a spice name. Use where it comes from. Just say the vegetables, or like you don't even need to mention it with vegan. You can put a little V label on it, so the vegans know it's vegan. But you're never gonna sell a vegan steak to an actual steak lover. There is just no way.
Right.
As long as you gotta call it a vegan steak, you know, like.
But you might sell like a curried chickpeas with quinoa. You might sell that to a meat eater, you know. But it's like, it's just how you phrase it. I totally agree with that. You don't scare your potential really customers away. And also the profit margins on vegan food are so much higher than meat food. You know, it's like the cost is so much lower. And so it's like, if you're struggling with profits right now because you've been closed for a few weeks or a few months, like those are very easy ways to have high profit dishes on your menu.
Go veggie cooking, but don't lower the prices. There is like no reason to lower the prices. It's like, get a better vegetables, get organic if you can, get local if you can. Go zero waste, you save even more money. Come on, I mean, you're raising the margin. You're only making the good, you only make the benefit from it.
Yeah.
There's like, how come there are restaurants opening during the pandemic? There are vegan restaurants opening and they have no problems with the customers.
Absolutely. That's awesome. And I think also you touched on something that I've said a bunch of times to people too, is like, treat your produce like meat. Like you can dry rub a piece of broccoli and grill it. You know, you can brine your carrots. You can do anything that you would do to a steak, you can do to a vegetable. And I think a lot of people think like, oh, you just put salt and pepper and boil it. And then it's like, well, that's a carrot with butter. You know, it's like, well, that's because that's all you did to it. Like I have a friend who is working. Are you familiar with koji?
Yes.
Yeah. So I have a friend who's doing like vegetable charcuterie. Where they're doing koji mold.
That's really cool.
It's so cool and it's so different, and it's just thinking about food in a completely different way. It's like, how do we make this vegetable look familiar enough for people who are not familiar with vegan or vegetarian cuisine to actually want to eat it?
There are so many techniques that you can use, and basically they are most of the times the same that you use with the other dishes with the meat. You just need to apply it to the vegetable or to, or, you know, like plant-based, it's also grains and pulses and like beans and stuff. And like you can ferment, you can salt, you can brine it. Again, it can come down to the flavor.
You can smoke it, you can sous vide it. Like, yeah, I think smoking vegetables is like something that most people don't do, but it produces an amazing texture and taste. And
I had a vegan restaurant. There were no vegans coming to a restaurant.
That's awesome.
There was like a handful of vegans coming in, you know, like the signature dish was a smoked pumpkin. And like people were crazy for it, like the meat lovers. The reviews, I literally had reviews saying that it's like all the vegan food would be like that. There is no problems being vegans.
Yeah.
It comes down to the flavor, you know, I mean, you just treat your cooking in the same way like you treat all the other cooking. It's the same. If you look at it as something of a less, because if you use your language in your head like, oh, it's only vegetable, it's only vegan food, then it's only gonna be that, right?
Yeah.
It's never gonna be nothing more.
So true. But all right, last question. What's the thing that you're most proud of in your own life, your own career, like a highlight for you?
That I have made it so far.
You're still here, you're still doing it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the first thing came to my mind, actually. Yeah,
that's
awesome.
After
like all the traveling and all the struggles and challenges, and I'm just still going for it. I mean, and I had no plans to stop, so
that's amazing. Well, do you have anything else you want to say?
Yeah, reduce your waste and go vegan. I mean, just do something, start somewhere, take it step by step, but start today, start what you have and where you're at.
Challenge yourself, that's huge, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for talking to us today. It was
Thank you for having me.
And, yeah, this was a really cool conversation. I think it's going to help a lot of people understand how to conceptualize something that might feel very out of reach for them at the moment.
I hope so.
Great. Cool. Well, have a great afternoon.
Have a great afternoon too.
All right.
Thank you so much for listening. Please make sure to give Vojtech some love on social media. You can find him on Instagram at Vojtech Vegh, that's
Vojtech Vegh, and at Surplus Food Studio. And make sure to check out his blog at www.surplusfoodstudio.com for more zero waste and plant-based tips. Links to his pages are in the description box below. Do you have a story to tell? Do you know someone who would make a great guest? We are looking to elevate the voices of forward-thinking chefs from all over the globe and talk about the real issues we face in this industry. If you'd like to be featured, or if you know someone who deserves a spotlight on their business, please send us an email at consciouschefs@gmail.com. If you enjoyed this podcast, please help us reach a wider audience by liking, commenting, subscribing to our YouTube channel, or sharing this in an industry forum or with a friend. Welcome to the Restaurant Revolution.